Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great. And thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed. Whenever we come to a major life event such as a graduation or some milestone, a coming of age perhaps, we want to know what the Lord's plan is for us. And here we see, in a sense, a coming of age of Abraham. We're introduced to him just a few verses earlier, and quickly we see a call from God. And God commands Abram to go. Human nature relishes in comfort, desires the familiar, serenity, and peace. We don't like to be troubled with the uncertainties of life, the challenges of life, the heartaches and turmoil of life, the afflictions of life. No, we want to know where we're going. We want to know what we're going to see along the way. We don't really like surprises, most of us. We want to have an idea of what's to come. God's call here to Abraham, though it was specific to Abraham, it's a universal call. And we'll see that a little bit later in the New Testament. But it's a call to go. It's a call to discover the faithfulness of the Lord. It's a call to embark on this great adventure of experiencing God's faithfulness and His power. It's a call to forsake all and follow Him. And that's what Abraham was called to do. He was called to leave his country, his kindred, his family, to leave his father's house. I suppose some are anxious to leave their parents' house, but if it's a nurturing home, a healthy home, that is a place of refuge, a place of sanctuary, a place of comfort, a place you can always return, a place where you know what to expect. You always know what you're coming home to. But here, Abraham is commanded to leave his father's house, to leave all that he is familiar with. Why? For the purpose that God will show him something. Something yet to be revealed. Something yet to be known. It was a big ask, and it's a big ask for all of us, really, to leave everything that we know, to surrender our hearts to God, and to pick up our cross and to follow in the way of Jesus. That's a big ask, and it's unnatural. It goes against our very nature to surrender our will and to say, Lord, I abandon all, I forsake all. Here I am, I follow you. We see that the Lord calls Abraham to a strange place, a place that he doesn't know about, a strange land, perhaps a language that he is unfamiliar with, a culture that he has not been introduced to yet. Everything is going to be different. Nothing is going to be known to him. He's going to get some things wrong. He's going to fail. He's going to have heartache. But he's going to have to trust the Lord. Leave it all. Go to a strange place. Reminded of Adam and how he was placed in a garden, and he was commanded to occupy that place, to dwell in the Lord's promise, to dwell in the Lord's gift, and to have dominion over it. And the call to Abraham is very similar, in such that he was to go out and he was to find this land that the Lord had for him, this place that the Lord would have for him, this promise, this covenant that the Lord has for him, and that he would dwell in it, that he would occupy it, that he would have dominion in that calling, in that promise, in that place. The call is the same for you and for me, that we would go, that we would answer the Lord's call, that we would forsake all, that we would be obedient to him, that we would discover his faithfulness, and that we would occupy his promise, that we would dwell in his promise and have a dominion over that blessing, that it would be ours, that inheritance would be ours, that promise would be ours. The Lord says that he will prove himself to Abraham. And indeed, he did, and he will prove himself to you. He has proven himself to me time and time again when we are obedient to him, when we answer his call, when we surrender our hearts and life, when we consecrate ourselves to him. He shows us who he is. He shows us his strong and mighty hand. He shows us his power to deliver, to sustain, to keep, to provide. The Lord blesses us when we are obedient to him. We see that Abraham went forth. We see that he called upon the name of the Lord a couple of times. And it's wise for us to do the same when we go into this strange land, this strange place that he has for us. It's wise to call upon the Lord rather than to rely upon ourselves for sustenance, for power, and for might. The Lord wants to show us something. He wants to show us his power. We want to show us his might. We see that Abram was a very rich man in chapter 13, verse 1. Rich in cattle, rich in silver and in gold. Abram was doing all right. He didn't probably need to leave his father's house. He probably didn't need, in terms of security, in terms of health and wealth, he probably didn't need to leave that place that he knew. Oh, he had worked there. He had contacts there. He knew the land. He had herds. He had wealth. He had equity and assets in that place. He was called to give it all up so he could discover something new, so that he could learn about God, that he could learn about faith. And we see again that Abram in verse 4 of chapter 13, that he calls upon the Lord. He builds altars, and he respects the Lord. He fears God, and he honors him on this journey, on this adventure. We see that Abram was a peacemaker. He says in verse 7 that there was strife between him and his nephew. And he didn't want any of it. he says, let there be no strife between us. We see that he's a peacemaker. And in a sense, we see him sanctifying himself, separating himself away from worldly ideals and natural pursuits of the natural affections. We see that his nephew Lot, he chose the land near Sodom and Gomorrah, and his focus was on worldly things. And Abram separated himself from that. He was focused on God. He didn't want the things of this world. He wanted the things of an eternal world that he had not seen, but that he had a premonition about, a promise of. In fact, in verse 14 of chapter 13, Genesis, he says, the Lord said unto Abram, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, and look northward, look southward, look eastward, and look westward. Lift up your eyes. So we see Abram shift his focus from the things of this world to heavenly things. Oh, that we would shift our focus to the Lord and the promise that he has for us. The hope of heaven, this eternal fellowship we have with Jehovah. That we would lift our eyes toward him. And it can be so distracting when our sight, when our vision is focused on all of the things around us. All of our troubles, all of our heartaches, all of our frustrations, all of our sorrows. Oh, that we would lift our eyes up and that we would see the Lord's blessing that's all around us. That is both eastward and westward, that is both northward and southward. His blessing is all-encompassing. His promise is for those who will dwell in his land, in his word. And we see that his promise is that he will give it, and to thy seed forever. I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, Abram, arise and walk. Walk through the land. Walk through this promise. Walk through this gift that I have for you. It's all yours. Oh, that we would dwell in the Lord's promise, that we would bask in his goodness, and that we would watch for his favor. We see that the Lord's blessing doesn't come without affliction, without trials. In this case, the kings that were opposed to Sodom and Gomorrah allied themselves against Sodom and against Gomorrah, and they went to war with those kings, and they defeated them. And they took Lot, and they took all of the wealth of Sodom and Gomorrah with Lot. And we see that Abram, in verse 14, chapter 14, verse 14, Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, and he armed his trained servants and pursued them. I love that. Abram, we don't know that he was a man of war, but he was willing to risk it all. He was willing to risk everything that the Lord had done for him because he knew that the Lord's work was not finished. And he was not satisfied just to sit on what the Lord had given him to that point. He was always pressing onward. He was always looking further, looking higher, with his focus on God. And we see that he was willing to sacrifice everything to do the Lord's work, to see God's promise fulfilled, because as of yet, the Lord's promise was not fulfilled to Abraham. It was incomplete. But Abram had faith in the Lord. How is your faith, brother? How is your faith, sister? Maybe you get to a place where you're partway through the journey and you say, oh, this is nice. The Lord has blessed me a little bit, and I see some comfort here, some refuge here, and I'm sure the Lord will continue to bless me, and I'll experience Him, and I'll just wait here for it. No, that's not what Abram did. He kept looking toward the Lord and having confidence that the Lord would go before him. And the Lord did. Abram, with his men, he reclaimed his nephew Lot and all of the bounty of war and brought it back. And that bounty was rightfully his. And again, we see the heart of Abram here. And as those kings kind of regathered themselves, they said, "Hey, what's going on here? We have all of our items, all of our things." And Abram says, "I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord." This is verse 22 of chapter 14. "I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth." Remember that, because we're going to come back to that verse in a little bit. The possessor of heaven and earth. "I will not take from a thread, even to a shoe latchet, that I will not take anything that is thine, that is yours, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich." He was unwilling to even allow there to be a perception that he had gained any notoriety, any fame, any wealth by his own hand. We see a completely sacrificial heart. This man was forsaking all to gain the kingdom of heaven. He did not want to possess worldly things. He wanted to possess an eternal throne. "I lift up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth." What a testimony. What a testimony that Abram had. And that call to forsake all, to be obedient, to go, it is a universal call. And we look in the New Testament now for a little bit. We'll tie it all together in conclusion. In Matthew chapter 19, Jesus was ministering to the multitudes and to his disciples. And in Matthew 19, chapter 25, Peter says, "Who can be saved? Who can be saved?" You know, we look at Abram and we say, well, wow, Abram had it all. He was wealthy. He had a beautiful wife. The Lord had blessed Abram. He had everything going for him. If Abram can't be saved, who can be saved? Jesus responded with this, with men, this is impossible. It's impossible to save yourself. It's impossible to be saved by the law, to be saved through good works. It's not possible. But with God, all things are possible. And Peter, he follows up and he says, "Lord, behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have therefore? Jesus said unto them, Verily, truly, I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 29, and everyone that hath forsaken houses, or brethren, or sisters, or fathers, or mothers, or wife, or child, or land, for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold, and shall inherit everlasting life. We see here the teaching of Jesus, that we must forsake all of those things that this world seems to value. And we must have our sights on an eternal reward, an everlasting inheritance. Jesus, before leaving this world, in chapter 28 of Matthew, verse 18, he says, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. This is Jesus speaking. He's speaking to the believers, to the disciples, and they know the scriptures well. And they know the stories of Abraham, the patriarchs. And they know that when Abraham called on the Lord, and that he acknowledged that God was the Most High God and the possessor of heaven and of earth. And Jesus here echoes that. Many, many generations later, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go, therefore, and teach all nations. Go to the strange places. Go to the unfamiliar. Go where I can demonstrate my power and my glory to you. Go to the place where you cannot rely on your neighbors or on your family or on your heritage or on your wealth or on your contacts or your network. Go where the only thing you have is me. Preach my word. Baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. Teach them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. We have the promise, the same promise that Abraham had, that the Lord would be with us wherever we go, all the time. That promise was given to Abraham, it was given to Peter and the disciples, and it's given to us here tonight. Oh, that we would go, that we would be obedient, that we would follow the promptings of the Lord, that we would go, that we would forsake all, that we would turn from the comforts of this life, and look instead, raising our eyes to the promise of God, that he would demonstrate his faithfulness and his power to us. That he would show himself faithful to us all the time, no matter where we go. The song is 238. The altars are open for prayer.